The Mrs. Q example that Sidman uses in this section is about a woman named Mrs. Q who has this obsession and compulsion about washing her hands anytime after she touches an object, whether it's a clean object, dirty object, it doesn't really matter. The moment she touches it, she feels the need that she has to go wash her hands immediately or she can't continue, and she can't continue. This interferes with her social interactions, specifically with her family, and doing anything productive. And that's why it's considered an obsession and compulsion, is because it interferes with her daily life and her ability to be productive in society. Next, Sidman moves on to conversion disorders, like hypochondria, which I think most people are familiar with, which is when somebody pretends or actually makes themselves sick in order to either get attention or get out of something, like using a sickness to avoid an obligation. So if you pretend to have a heart attack or actually induce a heart attack on yourself, it allows you to get out of work or some responsibility that you find extremely aversive. This may not always be a conscious decision. A person could have a hysterical paralysis, but they're just as incapable of moving as somebody who has a physical cause to their paralysis. So this means that it's essentially all in their head, or there's some just non-physical cause to this paralysis. Sidman finishes this section by saying, whenever there is a miracle cure, conversion should be suspected, because it is a way to solve this new problem of being ill in some manner that is now more aversive than what they were initially trying to avoid. So they may bring in like a faith healer who is able to cure them to the outside world, but to them it's just an easy way and an explainable way in order to have this disease or injury or illness magically cured without being accused of anything. Finally, Sidman talks about amnesia, fugue, and multiple personalities. He first starts off with amnesia, which is just memory loss. It may be one big act of avoidance, whether it's real or hysterical, meaning that the person isn't hysterical, that the person is intentionally forgetting or cause themselves to forget, whereas real would be if there was a trauma and your brain just automatically pushes that memory out or doesn't save that memory in order to protect you from having to relive and remember that trauma. And once a physical trauma to the head or a disease or infection can be ruled out, Sidman says that it should be looked at as a hysterical amnesia event. Next, he moves on to fugue, which is when somebody leaves their immediate environment to forget something or to avoid something. And when they return, that they have no memory of the time that they were gone. So if somebody is living in Chicago and all of a sudden family stresses become too much, they may go to Texas, and then they may return back to Chicago, but they would have no memory of their time in Texas, would be a fugue state. Sidman describes the differences between amnesia and fugue as amnesia being similar to a time zone in that you're forgetting a specific time in your life, whereas fugue is like a geographical zone and you are forgetting a specific location in your life. And that multiple personality as zones of conduct. So when somebody has multiple personalities, they're using them in specific situations, maybe with specific people or specific locations, and one personality typically does not know what happens when another personality is present. Sidman closes off with what is abnormal. Normal is subjective in some cases, like behavior accepted in LA may not be accepted in Boston. Sidman uses prisons versus the outside world, for example. What is acceptable and even encouraged in prisons, like physical violence, is not accepted in the outside world, and physical violence may even be why somebody ended up in prison. And then Sidman goes on to say that many psychiatrists believe modern women and feminists who do not fall into traditional roles are considered abnormal because they are working instead of being a mom, or not at home as often as psychiatrists believe that they should be, but that this is not harmful, and that many women who do play in these abnormal roles are perfectly okay with it and do not feel ill or need to be cured in any way. To close the chapter, Sidman says the most effective treatment will always arise from an understanding of the normal state. So how do we fix a behavior to get back to a normal state from an abnormal state? We must first know the normal state. And my question is, throughout most of this chapter, Sidman wrote about mental health diagnosis that some people may use as a defense mechanism. Do you agree that in order to heal these people or return them to a normal state, that we only need to look at the consequences and what reinforces us, or do we also need to look deeper into what actually caused whatever pathology they've been diagnosed with?